Good morning, and happy trees from Bob Ross. I'm actually shooting this video in Dylan's room. So I thought it'd be fun to have him in the background. He's a big fan of Bob Ross. Anyway, well, good morning, everyone at Bethany. This is Bryan Smith here to give you your morning devotional. And we're going to go ahead and jump back into the book of Colossians. That's where I was. I took a break last week to talk about another topic, but wanted to jump back in. So we're going to turn to back to chapter 1, and look at verses 21 to 23 today. So let's go ahead and read those verses. It says, "And you who once were alienated and hostile in mind, doing evil deeds, he has now reconciled in his body of flesh by his death, in order to present you holy and blameless and above reproach before him. If indeed you continue in the faith, stable and steadfast, not shifting from the hope of the gospel that you heard, which has been proclaimed in all creation under heaven, and of which I, Paul, became a minister." So let's start with verse 21. "And you who once were alienated and hostile in mind, doing evil deeds." Now, earlier in our discussion, previous videos, we established that this letter is addressed to Christians. But at one time, they were not Christians. They were not believers. And it's interesting that it says, you who once were alienated, because to be alienated means at one time you were not alienated. I'm going to cheat a little bit here and use my John MacArthur Study Bible notes. He points out that in the Greek, the term for alienated actually means estranged, cut off, or separated. So the only time that someone was not separated from God, well, that would have been before the fall of Adam and Eve, when they first sinned. And because of Christ, we as Christians, we're not alienated anymore. And verse 22 goes on to say, "He has now reconciled in his body of flesh by his death, in order to present you holy and blameless and above reproach before him." So the opposite of alienated is reconciled, and that's what Jesus did. He reconciled us. And as Christians, based on this verse, we're now perfect. He's presenting us holy and blameless before him. So yes, we're perfect. And it's only because of the sacrifice that Jesus made on the cross for us. Now, verse 23 is one of those verses that brings up the all too often argument of once saved, always saved versus you can lose your salvation. So I guess at face value, you could, well, let's read the verse first. And actually, I just dropped my notes here. But just real quick, verse 22, "He has now reconciled in his body of flesh by his death, in order to present you holy and blameless and above reproach before him, if indeed you continue in the faith, stable and steadfast, not shifting from the hope of the gospel that you heard, which has been proclaimed in all creation under heaven, and of which I, Paul, became a minister." So at face value, you can almost look at this verse like a quid pro quo. Quid pro quo. Yeah, I looked it up to make sure I said it right. God will reconcile you if you continue in the faith, stable and steadfast. And then the rest of that verse. For the record, I don't believe that is what it's saying, but on the flip side, why would anyone want to take that chance? Do you want to bank your salvation on a prayer that you said 20 years ago in Sunday school, and yet the life you now live says that you are not continuing in the faith, stable and steadfast, and you are shifting from the hope of the gospel? But someone might say, well, I'm fine because I said a prayer 20 years ago. I think these verses are a great reminder to truly check yourself and your faith in Christ. Do you truly believe in Christ alone for salvation? And if so, are you living your life in a way that shows God that you truly believe in his Son? Just something to think about today. have a great day, and God bless.